I already had a good experience, with sort of now like probably 5 or 6 years living in London. I'd done my degree and I'd had a good run with the band, with record labels, with having nominations for prizes. Hello.
Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hi, I'm really good, thanks. This is Adam, yeah?
This is Adam. Yeah, I appreciate you being flexible on the timing. I had another interview right before you, and he showed up later, and then it ran longer, so I'm so sorry.
It's all in the flow, man. It's all good. Yeah, that's fine.
I appreciate
No
it.
worries.
Awesome.
Yeah, no.
Well, I was going to say, this podcast is about you, your journey in music, and all the new stuff you have coming out and what you got going on today.
Fucking brilliant. Let's do
it. Amazing. Well, I guess first off, talk to me about where you born and raised.
So I was born in a town called Cambridge in the UK. And I was raised there. Yeah, I lived there until I left when I was about 18 years old. And my family is still based there now.
Okay. And how did you get into music? You come from a musical household? I mean, obviously you are an incredible musician and all that you achieved. So I'm curious to see how you got it.
Well, thank you, Adam. Yeah, I mean, it definitely, music was very normalized around me as I was growing up. My mum was a professional singer, although she sort of stopped by the time I was born. But, there'd be music. We're still one of those families who like sing together.
Okay.
At Christmas time, which was normal for me until I found all my friends found it really funny when I was a bit older. And so, and then I just love music and was making, all kinds of music. And then in my teens, it, naturally started to grow into my own self-directed kind of learning. I wanted to play the drum kit, and then I wanted to play, I did, and I learned drums, and then I learned piano, and then I learned guitar from there. And I was just very hungry to absorb and consume all kinds of styles and all kinds of music.
So you started off on drums?
Yeah, I mean, as a 9-year-old or a 10-year-old, that was like obviously the best thing possible. And the drum kit, and one of our neighbors had a drum kit, and I loved it, and I really took to it. And then my mum, particularly my mum, was quite good at like feeding me opportunities, So she created other things, like took me to drumming circles, or took me to other percussion classes, and some of them like wouldn't stick. I didn't like the ones that were more classical or formalized, or I certainly wasn't interested in learning to read music. Because I could just feel it in my body, and I felt like I could go directly to the thing I wanted. So I didn't want to be so cerebral. And then it continued from there, really. Like, again, my mum created this opportunity for me when I was in my mid-teens with a local pianist who was also in Cambridge, who was a bit older, but he's a pianist of some reputation now, called Frank Harrison. And Frank's dad owned this art gallery with all these like amazing paintings on the wall, this kind of very amazing environment. And there was a grand piano in that art gallery, and I would go and meet Frank every Friday. And he basically just taught me in a very instinctive, intuitive way the bare bones of like harmony, music, how it works, why this chord feels like it wants to go there, why this chord feels like it wants to go there, what it is to resolve, what it is to clash, all these things. And I was just like a sponge. I was about 14, 15 years old, and he taught me the bare bones of like how it all works, basically, in terms of chords and chord sequences and stuff like that. And then later on, I was about 18, I picked up the guitar, and I knew I was home with the guitar, because all of the drums and all of the rhythm that I'd learned when I was younger was there in the right hand, in my strumming hand. That was kind of like the drums. And then all of the harmony and all of the chord stuff was kind of there in my left hand, all the piano stuff. I remember thinking it's kind of naive, but it kind of still rings true. It was like, yeah, there's all my instinct as the drummer in the right hand. And still to this day, I can slow down my right hand, but I can't really explain it. I just kind of do it.
Interesting. And then, yeah, that makes sense though, because if you think about the hi-hat or what you're hitting on your right with your right arm, it would be, the more of the rhythm of what you would be doing. That's interesting.
Yeah. And then along those same lines, I remember this literally the first day I picked up the guitar, thinking that's going on the right hand, and then the left hand is the piano and the, more of the intellect, more of the decision making, choice. Kind of, someone had taught this to me. It wasn't self-taught. Like the right hand was totally self-taught. The drumming stuff, and the left hand was more of things I'd learned, and was more choices and decisions. And I can explain my left hand these days. I can break it down. So that's kind of some of the foundations for me.
Interesting. And I'm super curious to hear about how you learned how to play the hang, the hand, because I didn't know what the instrument was. I looked it up when I knew I was interviewing you, and I'm like, this is the coolest looking instrument ever. It looks like it's like a tortoise shell almost. It's kind of like, and I was like, okay. And I went on YouTube and I found this girl playing it, and it's like the coolest instrument I've ever seen and heard. Like, I was just shook, like how rad the things. I mean, it was like transcending. I'm like, I was just like, oh my, I could just sit here and like lay down and listen to this for like the whole day. Like it's just like a calming instrument. But I want to get to that. Yeah. I before we get there though, I'm just curious. So like learning all these instruments and becoming so like absorbed in it and just loving it so much, were you in a band, or was it just basically you just wanted to learn? Were you writing your own songs at this point, or not yet?
Yeah, I mean, so like I had bands. Yeah. I made bands with my friends. I made bands at school, and I made bands with my friends as we went through high school, and then I was joining like local samba bands. I joined a local Cuban band. And I was beginning to write songs. Yeah, I was writing songs. Also, like I got really into like my mum. She gave me an album by Steve Reich, the minimalist composer Steve Reich, called "Music for 18 Musicians." REICH, Steve Reich, and he's a legend of American modern classical music, and it's still to this day one of my absolute favorite records. And I was writing songs at this time, but the reason why I mentioned that album is that also inspired me to write. I wrote all kinds of stuff. I wrote like sort of my own modern classical minimalist pieces. I wrote stuff that wasn't song form. I made my own notation system, and like,
oh wow,
I don't know. I didn't know anything about anything. I just sort of did stuff, and just really had no question of what my passion was, and a very open interest in all styles, I think.
Mm-hmm. And well, so then you ended up moved down to Cuba, right? At 18 or 19 or something?
I was 19, yeah.
Was that you finished school and just decided like I want to go down there and study, or like tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do yet, and I'd finished school, and I knew I wanted to have a life of music, but I didn't know what yet. And then a friend's brother had been traveling, and he came back to Cambridge, and when I saw him, he said, "Oh, Nick, it's funny. I went to this music school in Havana, and when I was there, I kept thinking about you. I thought you'd enjoy it, And I thought a music school in Havana, it just like seemed impossibly cool to me and interesting. Mm-hmm. So I looked up the school. It had a very basic website, El Instituto Superior de Artes, the Institute of Higher Arts, basically, mm-hmm. And it's this dream project, I think, directly from Che Guevara and Fidel Castro when the revolution happened in the late 50s.
Wow.
They took command of this huge mansion and property with a golf course and stuff on the edge of Havana, with a huge dwelling on it, a big house. And the story goes that the two of them were walking through it, and they started to imagine this being, rather than a privately owned individual property, they were wondering, could we transform this into the Caribbean's premier art school? And they basically did that, like obviously with then minimal means. When the embargoes kicked in, they didn't have a lot of materials, so they developed these very interesting buildings dotted around this land, and it's now, and has been for decades, this school of music, dance, film, photography, and there's like 2,000 young people, maybe 60% Cuban, 40% international. And I just got in touch, and was lucky enough they said, sure, come along, and I got a spot there, and was there for a good chunk of time, just really learning some Cuban guitar, learning percussion. And it was the first time for me that I played every day. I played 2, 3, 4 hours every day, and I started to have that very gorgeous experience of like fluency, of really starting to have, if I have an idea, it can just move through my fingers. That I began to experience that, which was, I always remember there.
Mm-hmm. And where did you pick up the hang instrument? Was that when you were living there, or was that before?
No, it was just after. Like I decided what to do next. I found this course in London that was like a degree, a university degree in ethnomusicology.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like the anthropology of music, ethnomusicology, looking at music from around the world, particularly Africa and Asia, throughout different time. And I just was like, yeah, that interests me. I'd love to go do that. And just before I started that uni course in London, I went to a music festival in the UK called WOMAD. And there was a little stall, like a percussion shop, like a little store, with like loads of different percussion instruments. And they also had 2 of the first 60 hand drums, because the instrument had only been invented, maybe 3 years before that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there really weren't that many. And so me and my friend were at this festival, we stumbled across it. I remember absolutely falling in love with it. And calling my mum, and again, she's coming up a lot already in this podcast. And so she should, she's
sounds like a big influence, a big party, a big supporter.
Lot to be grateful for. Yeah, and I remember just, really having the money to get this instrument, but calling my mum up saying like, please, I've seen this thing, trust me, like send me the money and I'll get it, and like, you'll understand. I couldn't quite describe it. I said it looked like a UFO, like a tortoise shell.
Right.
And it sounds incredible. And yeah, so then I took that instrument to London as a student, and so did my friend. He went to an art school in London, but nearby. And within 6 months or something, we met the other players, and we formed our band Portico Quartet, based around this hang drum.
Oh wow! Okay, so and how long were you playing it before you were able to, actually, put a band together and write with this instrument?
Well, I mean, the thing about the hang drum is it was absolutely instant for me, because I'm a very intuitively led rhythmic person. I can kind of get music out of something. I'm not a specialist at, I'm pretty much a specialist at one thing in a way with the guitar. So I was saying, I was already playing a lot of different drums, like the frame drums, skin drums, and I could take those rhythmical patterns and then literally transfer them over to the hang drum, HANG, hang drum.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an exciting process for me, because I didn't have to do anything differently. And the same patterns were now gloriously melodic and harmonic, because the hang drum is for anyone who doesn't know, is a tuned percussion instrument, similar to the steel pan, but much softer. And you use it with your hands and your fingers. So I was taking those same patterns and just doing them on the hang drum, and suddenly making this gloriously melodic music.
Mm-hmm.
So in answer to your question, it took no time at all, and it was a process of some months before we had a little band together. But yeah, it was really quick, really.
Because with the hang drum, you have the rhythm, but then it's almost like there's these holes on it, right, where you can tap them, and it almost gives a different is it different notes? Because it sounds like you're almost playing different notes.
Yeah,
like if you're
so it's got
they coordinate with like, here's an A, or this is an E, or oh really? Okay.
Yeah, it's a scale. Yeah, it's a scale. And actually, on that point, interestingly, when they first made the hang drum, they were really free forming which scales they used. They experimented lots of different scales, and some of them some stranger, really interesting scales. And I liked that. And then at a certain point, a couple of years after I got into them, around maybe 2007, they uniformed all the hang drums to be this kind of D harmonic minor. And that's cool because it means every hang drum player can jam together effortlessly.
Right.
But I thought it was a loss in a way, because that variety of the diversity of scales was cool, I thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I looked it up. I'm like, I've never even seen this, but like, then I found them online, and they're not cheap, but they're also like really, really cool sounding. That's like an instrument I was like, wow, this would be so rad to learn, because it's just such a cool, like, calming instrument.
Yeah. Oh, it's a real impressive invention. You know, you don't hear, first of all, you don't hear of many new instruments. Like, there's new technology, there's new, all kinds of new technology always. But in terms of new acoustic instruments like that, it's pretty rare. And then they're deep, man. The guys who made it in Switzerland are very deep. You know, they are very aware of literally the certain resonances and frequencies which open up the human physiology in terms of opening the heart, and they really explored that. So when you hear it and you do have this kind of like wow experience, it's totally designed that way to really open up kind of our physiology, and it's just a really beautiful sound. And it's almost like it would take a guitarist years and years to develop his understanding of his instrument, his amplifier, or her pedals. Like, it would take them a long time to develop a sound as good as this. But the makers of the hand drum have already done that. All you got to do is strike the thing with your finger in the right way. And, you know, it's great for kids can do it, and this glorious sound is it just happens for you, you know. So it was the perfect basis to start a band, make a band with, you know.
And I haven't heard of any bands really using it. Like, it's such a beautiful instrument that I would assume that more people would use it. And maybe you know more than I do, but I feel like not a lot of people are using it.
Yeah, I mean, Bjork's used it. Fortet has used it.
Okay.
It's kind of, you know, it's definitely not an underground thing like it was back then. I mean, by the way, you know, like with this band that we formed, and then we had our process of releasing albums and doing well, like, we found ourselves for a moment at the forefront of this new instrument. And then, you know, my journey went different ways, and you know, in the interim years, it's become, I would say, like, quite well known, the hang drum, but it's still pretty out there.
Yeah, it really is. Like, when I saw it, I was so intrigued, and then when I heard it, I'm like, wow, this is such a cool sounding thing.
You should get your hands on one. You'll enjoy it.
I know. I looked it up. I'm like, whoa. And yeah, it's rad. You know, what's funny is I showed it to my father-in-law, who was at my house when I was learning about it. And I was like, look, because he's way into music. I'm like, look at this instrument. This thing is like, have you heard of this? And he's like, no. And I'm showing it to him. And then he showed me, I think it was Thomas Edison or somebody, like, inventor made an instrument. And it's of like the tones, like if you were to take your finger and kind of rub it over the top of a wine glass with water in it, it goes like it has that high pitch. It's on, he showed me this video, and it's like on a rack, like a bar, and there's all this glass, and it spins, and it has water, and it sounds like an organ. Have you seen that?
Yeah, so you don't have to turn your hand, because the actual whole structure is turning,
and you just put your hands down like it's a keyboard, and it's like He showed me that. I'm like, oh my god! Like, and there was another instrument just blew my mind.
Yeah, I've seen that once. Yeah, saw a video of it once. Amazing.
It's just so wild, but that's so cool. Like, and again, when I heard that, I was just like blown away. But you obviously left that band. You guys had success. You left the band, and then you started your own solo career, which ends up having, you know, mass success as well. Was that a hard decision to make, like leaving to start pursuing, you know, a singer-songwriter career?
Yeah, it was. You know, because we were young and we had our band. You know, you lived that. I mean, I think some people know that journey. You know, like what it's like to make a band with your friends, or people have their first startup company, or like, you know, it's your whole life, and we lived it, and we were a tribe, and we all lived together, and so it was something. It wasn't a hard decision to leave, in the sense that I knew I had to to go on this path, you know, because I was a guitarist and I wasn't playing any guitar, and I was a singer and I wasn't singing, you know, so I wanted to do both the guitar and the songs, which weren't a part of Portico Quartet. And I wanted to grow, and I wanted, you know, I wanted to do different music. So I knew I had to, and that I couldn't go against that. But at the same, but it was a hard decision because, yeah, you know, like I love being in that band a lot.
And once you like, what do you do first? Like you just decide, okay, I mean, obviously you leave the band and you have probably a handful of songs together. Do you just go out and just start trying to play everywhere you can? Like, what was your first, you know?
Yeah,
like,
well,
how do you get off the ground?
I mean, being in the band, I already had a good experience, you know, with sort of now, I probably 5 or 6 years living in London. I'd done my degree and I'd had a good run with the band, with record labels, with having nominations for prizes, with like making a good network of contacts, you know. So it wasn't like starting from scratch. And I just, yeah, I already had a good sense, for example, of the different scenes in London that I was a part of, or that I wanted to go and play at, and then you just kind of, yeah, start making a name for yourself. And I started playing a lot of nights and developing my material. I remember I got a little studio space. I had just enough money to get by. I had like a, you know, I was a teacher's assistant in a classroom as well for a year to just help them pay this little studio space. It was like not a recording studio, a little writing studio I had.
Right.
And I remember like studying my heroes. It was like this phrase. It was like, I'm just gonna like fill my mind with like how the greats how they write songs, how they put bands together, how they, you know. I remember being just really hungry again, and it wasn't too long before I signed a major deal with Universal Records, and yeah, you know, like I got help making my first EPs, first recordings. Then I got a booking agent, and I kind of all then, yeah, it's hard for me to remember the sequence of everything, but it then sort of started to get kind of plugged into a more professional scenario with my first recordings, and starting going out on support tours, you know. So that was quite a kind of a baptism of fire, because I was playing in pubs or small venues, and then I was going out and supporting these Mexican guitarists called Rodrigo and Gabriela for 18 nights around.
Oh wow, I know
Europe.
Who that is.
Yeah, Rodrigo and Gabriela. Yeah, I supported them for a long run. You know, and they're playing arenas in Germany and in France, and yeah, supported them for a bunch of dates. I supported Willie Mason, supported Laura Marling, Leanne La Havas. Like my life seemed to suddenly get like, I was out on the road a lot. I was just now kind of like learning how to perform these songs pretty much solo at the guitar. And I was, you know, yeah, that was how it was kind of building for me. And it wasn't easy in a way. I definitely felt an interruption with the normal rhythms of being at home in London. And, you know, it was a lot to get used to, as well as really fun and good, you know.
And what would you say, like, you know, obviously signing Universal and having these big moments, these big tours, what would be, can you think of like a turning point or like a milestone moment for you that you're like, wow, like this is really, really working. I'm so glad I, you know, decided to take this path as a songwriter, singer-songwriter.
I mean, I think there's various things I could point to, you know, like the first album. I think, yeah, probably the answer to that question for me is a song called Fever to the Form. So it's kind of a combination of an artistic response. Like, it was something I made that I was like, wow, I'm really proud of this. Like, this is mixing the things I ever wished to mix, you know, like from songwriter to like more electronic music. And it was a very instinctive, natural song, quite a simple song, but it had genuine depth and texture. And like, it's still to this day it is my most successful song. And I think I made that with a producer called Dan Carey down in South London. So, and it was the beginning of our relationship. We've done a lot of work together, Dan and I. And I think that's making that song and then releasing it and it kind of being its, you know, a hit with a small H, you know, it's never stopped connecting. It's a very special song for me, that one. And that opened up a lot of doors for me.
Mm-hmm. And from like, obviously you have a new record coming out next month or July?
Yeah.
No, next month, June
10th. Yeah.
And like, so just to get into where you were kind of when the pandemic happened, like what would you have, like, where does this record fall into that? Or had you did you begin writing it much later? Like, where were you when, you know, COVID hit, and then how did moving forward?
So first album was released in 2014 or, you know, way back then. And then, you know, things, I was quite slow with my process with writing the next albums, and it was end of 2017.
Yeah.
And I toured that extensively for 2 years, all the way up until 2019.
Mm-hmm.
When I finished touring that record, I now had 2 kids.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so life was flowing.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I have 2 kids. I feel you on that, man. I can't imagine.
Yeah, fella, wow. Hands are full. And I decided to move to Ibiza with the family. I'd finished the last kind of shows of the second album campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And now I wanted to kind of write the new album and live in a warmer climate, basically. Simple as that. I wanted to have less freezingly cold winters, and the kids were young. And so I moved to Ibiza, and I got writing through 2019. I started developing these songs, which have become this new album. And then, of course, beginning in 2020, I managed to get to the UK in January 2020 and did some demos. And then, you know, in a way that the pandemic happening at that time was quite kind for me, because I wasn't already out on tour having to cancel shows and you know, like cancel album campaigns and stuff. I was already in a quite insular process of writing new material. And the pandemic just kind of meant that I had a bit more time in a way to develop this material.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's been many effects of the pandemic on me, but I'm grateful that the timings were like they were in many ways, for sure.
Right. So yeah, it sounds like you were going to take some time off anyway, and then to focus on the record. Do you feel like the pandemic had any effect on the way the album sounded at all, or was it you already were planning on kind of approaching the record this way anyway?
Yeah, I'd say that my wheels were rolling. I knew what I wanted this record to be. Being on stage a lot with the second record really taught me a lot of basic principles about what I wanted to do with this, with what has become the next record. So all the tours I did back in 2017, 2018, 2019, like I knew I wanted this next record to be very pure. Like I knew I wanted to have space to breathe, not fill it up too much. And yeah, I mean, the things I care about writing about, I've just been focused on them, and I think I didn't have to change them with the pandemic. It's already resonant, you know. I'm singing about, you know, this time of great transformation on Earth, and the songs are personal and they're planetary, and they were always like that. And I didn't have to change a thing, and they just resonate. You know, and I think I made the decision to make the album with a producer in Paris called Renaud Letang. And it wasn't the easiest thing to decide to work with a producer in a different country. I was living obviously in Ibiza, Spain. He was in Paris, and the world was locking down. But in actual fact, we started working when the world was opening up a little bit. This was the end of 2020. And I remember this little corridor between Ibiza and Paris and his studio, for various reasons, just remained open when everything around it was shutting, you know. It seemed to be like countries are shutting down here and there, and Renault himself was the owner of his studio. So he was like able to say, no, we're keeping business as usual, we're carrying on, we're open. So I was able just to keep making this record despite everything closing down.
So it wasn't like something you had to do virtually, like you didn't have to approach it any differently when it came to that, it sounds like.
Well, Well, come the beginning of 2021, we were still working on the record, but of course, then there were another wave of like,
right,
proper lockdown. So by that point, we then did have to pause until April. So then we picked it up in April, and I finished it off with a few more sessions in Paris. And but yeah, you know, it's been a revelation working with Renaud, the producer.
And it's the first time you've worked with them?
Yeah. I was, you know, I was tipped off to his work. I was put onto his work. Yeah, just before I started working with him. So I didn't know him personally, but I knew a lot of the albums. You know, I knew a lot of the records he made. He made all the records with Feist back in the noughties.
Oh, sure, okay.
And he made an album I've always loved back in the late 90s called Clandestino by Manu Chao.
Okay.
So and he's done a lot of stuff in recent times with Mac DeMarco and with Connan Mockasin.
Oh, really?
So
yeah, he's got quite a, you know, diverse, you know, diverse amount of records there.
Yeah, I mean, he's really one of the top producers in France. He's very much like the top alternative, you know, producer, I would say, in France. So he's a legend, man. I mean, he's a master of. I didn't find a genre that he couldn't explain. You know, like when I love a lot of wide range of music, and a lot of them influenced my music, and he had such a working understanding, in-depth understanding of different genres, and just a proper old school producer. There aren't that many these days, I don't think. And he, I think you can hear it with this new album. New Mythology is the name of the new album, and I think you can hear it. It's like these recordings are just like are really, really high quality recordings, and he's to thank for that, really.
That's amazing. Mecca's the first single you put out from the record?
Mecca's now it's the fourth.
Oh, fourth. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mecca's
man.
the one I just recently listened to, so I assumed it would be, but I guess the record's coming out in a couple weeks, so that makes more sense.
Yeah.
So well, tell me about Mecca.
Yeah, Mecca for me is a really exciting track because it is, you know, it's quite a new space for me musically. And one of the reasons it's a new space for me musically is because it's the only cover on the album. So the song was written by someone else. It's written by a band from the UK who are no longer together actually anymore. A kind of a post-rock indie band called Wild Beasts.
Okay, I've never heard of them. I didn't realize it was a cover song.
Great band, and I always love that song of theirs called Mecca. And I decided one day to learn it on the guitar, and then I realized, I started to look closer at the lyrics, and I thought, fuck, these lyrics are incredible. And because someone else wrote it, it makes musical choices that I wouldn't normally do myself, and that's why it kind of pushes me to a different place, much more into my falsetto voice in the singing. And then so it's also a song where, like, most of the time I start recording on the guitar, and that was the same with Mecca. But somewhere through the recording process, we actually muted my guitar part, and it was like, there it is. Wow, that's where the space is. It was much better without my guitar. So for me, it's exciting because it's a song where I'm not playing guitar, and it's not. I think I'm really proud of this piece of work, actually.
Is it quite different from, I have to go back and listen to the original now. Is it quite different from the original sound of the song?
I'd say so, yeah. I mean, I've honored the song, you know, basically, but I always loved the song. And when I found out how good the lyrics were, I was like, these lyrics need to be really understood. They can be really clearly said, because I didn't quite get them. The original song is brilliant, but it's complex. The arrangements, the musical choices they made in the studio, the way they've performed it, it's really complex. And I just thought, you know, actually we can be simpler with this. Like, this is going to really cut through and resonate if it's given space to breathe.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on the record coming out in a couple of weeks, and then you're doing a tour of the States. I saw you have you have a sold out show in LA and doing New York and Toronto, and
That's right.
that's exciting.
Man, I'm so ready and excited to tour this music and this album. Yeah.
Very, very cool. And you're doing Glastonbury too, aren't you?
Yep. So we got a lot of touring starting in the UK. I mean, it's actually a really intense moment for me because with all this build up I've just described over many years and all this break from touring and everything, I'm getting ready to release this album, and I've actually just recently developed a wrist injury, which is the
Oh my
first time
gosh.
I've ever had that. Yeah, it's really it's a deep process for me. It's a deep journey, and you know, I'm in the rehearsal studio now, and we're finding a way to put this show together in a really interesting, really great way that is I'm playing a bit less guitar, you know, and I come to the States in July, so I'm hopeful that that the injury will be fully cleared by then. But right now, having been through a lot of fear and deep, sort of dense feelings around it, you know, I was pretty pretty unpleasant to be around for a week or two back, you know, a month ago, because it was looking like I might have to cancel everything. Thankfully, I don't. But having been through that, now I've gone into acceptance, and like this wrist injury is teaching me so much right now about having the courage to show up in different ways on stage. I'm playing piano again. You know, I'm singing songs without the guitar. I'm bringing more of the recorded sounds from the studio into the production on stage, which is wild. And it's I'm pretty sure this wrist injury is going to be something that is opening up the whole new and next levels for me.
Right. It's like you're almost,
really
instead of
trusting it.
staying on just the one thing, you're having to like you're forced to almost reevaluate how to do the show live.
Yeah, man, and it's frightening, you know. It takes me to really uncomfortable places, but I'm just like, okay, this is where I grow. This is it. Like, I'm going to be up on stage without a guitar in my hand. That's a first. But it's cool. Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be really, you know, I like that it's going to need me to share that vulnerability with my people, with the crowd, and with the fans, and we're going to have to co-create it together. And yeah, it's a deep process for me right now.
Congratulations, Nick, on the record, and you know, the shows here in the States. I know if not all of them are sold out. I know the LA one is for sure.
Yeah, New York is as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So congratulations on that, and what I've heard of the record's amazing, and I appreciate your time, and thanks for being flexible on the time as well.
No problem, man. No problem. Nice to chat, Adam.
Yeah, I have one more quick question for you, Nick, before I let you go, though. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Yeah, it's something I'm really passionate about, you know. I don't know about advice. Like, I'm a bit skeptical of advice because I'm a beginner in you know, in some senses. I try and always stay a beginner, if you know what I mean, in the openness to things. But study your heroes really closely, and you know, like I think yeah, just do things. You have to, it's like this: make music that comes from a place that is so deep inside of you. It's so necessary for you to make that music. You'd be kind of deformed or like unresolved or frustrated if you didn't make the music. Like, make it from a place of such deep necessity that the question of whether it's good enough or how it compares in the world to other works is just completely irrelevant, because you made it for your own reasons, because you needed to, because you're happier now that you've made it. And that is the way for young musicians to be liberated from the tyranny of comparison, from the tyranny of like thinking too much about you know, judging themselves too much. You know, the question is like, can you go deep enough to find something that you just have to express? You know.